All right, everyone. Welcome to Wellness Wednesday. I am so excited. As October, many of you know, our theme is health this month, and I am joined here by my friend and my doctor, Dr. Neela Sandal. So, Dr. Neela Sandal is the founder of the Atma Clinic here in the great city of Lawrence, Kansas. And he and his team are seeking to reinvent healthcare, which I know is a tall order. And so, Neela, first, thank you for taking the time to join us. And why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what you mean by reinventing healthcare?
Yeah, thanks, man. Happy to be here. Yeah, I think it's probably not a surprise to anybody that our healthcare system is in a lot of trouble. I don't think anybody is really satisfied with their healthcare. And the thing is that this is a huge multifactorial system problem. And it's a system problem in which there are trillions of dollars locked up. So there's a lot of money sticking things in place, even though they don't work. There's a lot of people extracting from that system, ultimately at the expense of individuals. And so what we're doing over at Atma Clinic is we're essentially designing a parallel medical system. We do it all. We do it from primary care all the way up to specialist care. And really what we're doing is we're creating efficient medicine. A lot of what doesn't work about our healthcare system is that most of the money is spent on the terminal end of healthcare. It's spent on hyper specialization. It's spent on hospital visits. And I think, anybody who looks at the statistics on chronic illness in the US is going to be flabbergasted. I mean, they're actually abhorrent. It's kind of terrifying. And this is entirely because the philosophy of healthcare, the system is designed to allow people into chronic illness and then try and manage that at the very, very end of life. And it's frankly, it's terrible. It's terrible. Not only is it sort of financially ridiculous, it's just crap healthcare. That's the truth of it.
Well, why don't you tell us how you really feel about it, Neela?
Right. Yeah, I was joking beforehand, right? Like I'm starting to bang the table on stuff more and more. I'm like, no, this is the way it needs to be. Because I think people need to hear that from MDs, right? It's like the people who should be the guardians of our culture's health need to be a little bit angrier and louder about this. And so what we're doing over at Atma Clinic is, I looked at the system and I was like, okay, I could try and reform this system. And definitely that's tempting. But the reality is that when you look at the amount of money that is arrayed against you in that, pharma, insurance, hospital systems, it's mammoth, right? And they're all literally directly heavily invested in that system. My thought process is, well, why don't I just build something that actually works and let people vote with their feet? People can go where they want to go, and it's not to say that, some of this hyper specialization in these hospitals are bad. I'm glad we have them. That's actually cool. But it shouldn't be the primary focus. It shouldn't be the thing that we rely on because it's expensive and it's not good health care. It's just illness management.
Yeah, so, it's like sick care, right? Because I remember even like when my mom was in the hospital and I was calling and talking to you, the number of times that she has a headache, they give her a pill. It was all the management of symptoms, not the treatment of causes. And is that kind of the philosophy behind what we call healthcare today? And so
Absolutely.
many. Okay,
you nailed it. And the thing is that that's really insidious. It sneaks into everyone's conception of what is possible for healthcare. One of the things that I tell my patients more than anything is I want you to feel excellent. I don't want you to accept aging. I don't want you to be like, oh, I used to be able to do that when I was 30 and I can't do that anymore. Well, pause. Let's fix that. There's no hard-coded biologic reason that you can't do that in most cases. And there are sort of, 15 hard locks that we consider about biological aging. But the reality is that our technology is expanding rapidly. The science on this stuff, there's more that's been discovered about in the science of longevity specifically in the past 6 months than there was in the past 6 years. So it's really climbing up that asymptote now. It's really accelerating. And so I'm always advising people, let's get out in front of things. A very straightforward example is if someone is used to running and they injure their knee and they're like, well, I guess I'm not going to run anymore. Well, we shouldn't accept that because then we're going to age prematurely. We're going to decline. We're like, the knee's just out. It is what it is. I don't want to have a surgery. Surgery is not great anyway. Let me just give up running. Like, no. Pause. You absolutely can and should fix that in almost all cases. There's a whole new science of regeneratives. And I mean, the tech innovations are completely, I think, underrepresented to the public. There is so much amazing technology that most MDs in the system literally have no idea exists. So it's kind of a wild time. And that's why I get so worked up and excited about it, because I think about my friends and family and I'm like, I don't want you guys subjected to any of this. I want you guys having legitimately good healthcare. That's why I founded Atma Clinic in my hometown, right? Go Lawrence, Kansas. And it's because we can do better. And we just have to get the education out there.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of the stuff that you're focused on now and that you've really been researching and paying attention to. In fact, you just shared with me that you, when we were getting ready for today's session, that you had gotten back from a longevity conference. And yet one of the things that I would say gets me a little bit frustrated about all the longevity stuff is either one, it's so complicated, I don't understand it. Or two, it's like, yeah, if I'm knocking down 100 mil a year, then I'm totally going to do that stuff. It just doesn't seem affordable or reachable for most people. And so I wanted to ask you, like, for those in the audience, right, that want to kind of tap into this longevity movement, both the expansion and the quantity, but also the quality of life. What are some of the things that are kind of mainstream or open that maybe people don't know about, Neela, that they could tap into?
Yeah, awesome question. I think one of the funny things about the science of longevity right now is that it's very much advertised as this sort of like billionaire medicine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And the thing that people don't realize is that that is changing really, really rapidly. We have access now to all sorts of completely wild epigenetic age clocks, pace of aging data, testing, trend lines that used to cost, it was just not consumer available. It was like, you want it, you need $100,000 per test sort of thing. And like literally there are now so many companies out there that are competing for this as the tech becomes more accessible, more easy to process, that you can run these tests that used to be $100K for $500.
Wow.
So it's actually kind of astounding. And to answer your question directly, one of the things that I think people should know is that even when you go to this really, really far edge of medicine and what's available in the science, a lot of the things that move the needle on those are actually really simple. So there's a lot of stuff in the realm of lifestyle change that is like genuinely dramatic. I won't ever use a drug or a supplement for some of these things. It's just almost common sense. Sometimes people need to see the data on that to be like, oh man, I increased my VO2 max, a marker of how heavily I can exercise in a session. This is one of the strongest correlative pieces of data with longevity, for instance. And you'll hear all sorts of good folks, Mark Hyman, Rhonda Patrick, Andy Galpin, all these guys will talk about VO2 max because it is one of the most powerful things we have. There's not a supplement or a prescription that's going to replicate that. And that's free. But sometimes people have to see the data, like their personal data, to be like, oh crap, I really should go to the gym and suffer a bit. Like,
yeah. So if I'm somebody in the crowd, right, and I want to take advantage of all this longevity research and science and the things that are becoming so much more available, what are the 2 to 3 ways you would encourage me to get in that game?
I think that there's a lot that's accessible to people, but it can be overwhelming. Probably the best thing to do is to get connected with someone who can coach you through that, ideally with data, because that's so compelling, especially if people are really busy in their lives. You want the things that are high efficiency for you as an individual, not kind of generically for, everyone. Because you can pick up a book, right? There's piles of books on longevity and they're rarely that inspiring because people are like, well, do I need to work on my VO2 max? Do I need to work on my, and they're all full of tips and hints. But the reality is that longevity is a deeply personal thing. You really want someone who can analyze your chemistry, look at your physiology and say, oh, these are the top 2 or 3 things you can do. There's a lot of diminishing returns in this stuff too. If you want to be like Brian Johnson, one of the famous, guys who really, I think that stuff's great, right? Like they call themselves longevity athletes.
Uh-huh.
I think that's great. But just like an Olympic athlete, those guys make it a full-time job. It's a whole thing. And what I've seen from doing these data analyses on my patients, on my clients over time is that really the simple stuff that's targeted to them is what moves the needle. A lot of the really esoteric stuff, a lot of the really expensive stuff, that doesn't really move the needle. That's like if you're at 95%, you're a great athlete, but you want to go to the Olympics, like that last little bit takes a pile more. So, I mean, in one sense, I would say keep it simple and find someone who can actually help you trend your data so you feel that this is actionable, so you can be enthusiastic about it.
And is that like a functional medicine doctor? What would you say, like, what are they looking for in a person like that to know that they've got the right fit?
That is a surprisingly difficult question to answer. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to create better answers for over at Atma Clinic. I'm trying to standardize some of this. Generally speaking, if you go to an MD or a DO, those are kind of similar credentials, who has a longevity clinic or an emphasis on longevity, that's a good start. But the trouble is that this is totally unregulated. It's a wild west out there. And so you could go to people and they have no idea what they're doing. They're just like, yeah, I'm a longevity specialist, but there's no credentialing, there's no regulation. What I would recommend, first of all, is you need to go to someone who's going to trend data for you. Mm-hmm. If you go to someone who's going to trend data, then you don't have to trust them. It should prove itself.
Right.
And so usually that's going to be people who are using epigenetic age clocks. That's a buzzword that people should lean into for longevity work. If you go to a longevity specialist and they can't give you your Dunedin pace of aging, an epigenetic age clock, they're probably not really well versed in that. And
what
again,
is that, Neela? What is an epigenetic age clock?
Yeah, awesome question. Yeah. When we think about age, we're all culturally conditioned to think about a number of years. Mm-hmm. I'm 38, I'm 76, whatever that might be. But people also realize that there are 76-year-olds who are climbing Everest.
Right.
And there are 76-year-olds who can't get off the couch. And so the chronological concept of age is aggressively outdated. How do we therefore figure out age? Well, the answer is we have to actually look at the different markers of aging in your unique body. I go back to the idea of having an individual approach. My kidney ages at a different rate than my heart, ages at a different rate than my brain. And my brain's rate of aging is different than Jordan's rate of aging. So we have to try and really break that down. And so epigenetic age clocks are a pile of markers. A good epigenetic age clock is usually about 150 plus different markers that correlate really strongly to the rate of aging of individual organs.
So is that kind of the difference between, like, I'm chronologically 42 and yet biologically or epigenetically I could be younger or older based upon those markers?
Exactly right.
Okay.
And I know that you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Something that they will all be very probably interested in hearing is that most entrepreneurs age really fast. That's not going to be a surprise to anybody, right? Like, you guys are all stressed. You guys are all working your asses off. And when we look, I do a lot of CEOs, for instance. Uh-huh. And when we look at epigenetic age clocks, we usually see that people are prematurely aged, meaning that our chronological age is actually lower than our biologic age. In one sense, that's kind of an exciting position to be in because you can really move that needle very quickly.
Okay. So once you know, and what I love about you, Neela, is that you do your best to talk in generalities, but the thing about Atma is that you guys are a very specific, you look at each individual and what their challenges are. And so when you're talking about moving the needle, it's going to be based upon which markers are positive and which ones are negative, right?
100%.
Okay.
And that's what makes things efficient, right? And when I talk about creating a parallel medical system and creating efficiency in medicine, what that really means is thinking about the individual, right? There are these terms like cookie cutter or assembly line medicine. You know, that's really what the system of mainstream medicine is now. And to have good healthcare, we really have to push back on that. You don't really have physicians who can do a great job in 15 minutes. It's not a real thing. That's not possible. You can run down an algorithm in 15 minutes, but you're not going to be able to pay attention to the individual. And that's not a touchy-feely thing. They have unique biochemistry, neurochemistry, and you have to understand that to actually build a product that works for them efficiently.
Yep, that makes total sense. And that I think also the blanketed advice that we hear on Instagram or whatever. I shared last week with this group that there's people out there that will tell you, like, if you want to supplement protein, drink whey protein. I can't have whey protein. It makes me sick. Right.
And so sadly,
it kind of sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But we all have individual constitutions. And it seems like so much of what you're saying here is that there's a level of personal responsibility that we're all just going to have to take with this, because this shit is serious and it's important. Right.
Yeah. And also I'll add in, it's actually easier than you think. It's much nearer than you think. And this is to everyone who's listening, who's like, oh, I read a book, 30 is the new 100, optimal aging. And that all seems pie in the sky. But if you work with a professional who does this, it's not something that really is a huge pain. A lot of this is very simple. It's very direct, and it's all data driven. And so that's a really big deal, because I think entrepreneurs, of course, are always thinking very, very critically about the data, right? Like, what actually moves the needle for their business? We need to think the same way about health. We need to see what the baseline is. We need to present the intervention, and we need to make sure that the intervention actually worked for that person. So in the end, if you have a professional who knows what they're doing, it's a lot easier than it kind of seems on its face.
Yeah, a professional who is acting through the data, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and educating you through that.
Yeah.
Right? Because then we're like, oh, I understand. I worked my butt off at the gym, and I actually slowed my pace of aging from 1.2 years per year down to 0.8 years per year. Okay, well, let's do the math on that. That's actually insane. If you think about the amount of not only years gained, but healthy years gained, it's pretty absurd.
Yeah. So, I know that you don't like to speak in generalities, and yet we do have a little bit of a general crowd here. And what I'm wondering, Neela, like, from your position, the people that you see, the things that show up at your door based on who you are in your clinic, what would you say are the things that, if you were like sitting there as a doctor and you could just download this idea into people's minds, or this habit into people's minds as it relates to their health? And I know that it's kind of a general question, but what would you say, like, you would want people here to really know as it relates to their health today?
Maybe the best answer to that threads the needle between the general but says something to specific individuals is that I really want you guys to listen to your body. I really want you to be conscious of your health. Consciousness is at the root of health. You can only be as healthy as you are aware. Let me make that.
Yeah, say that one more time. You
can only be as healthy as you are aware. Consciousness is literally the root of your health. And I don't even mean that in an esoteric fashion. I mean that directly. It's also true esoterically, of course. That's why things like meditation are so important. But when we shake off all that cultural dogma about what we think health should be and what is possible, and we go back to that childlike curiosity, how do I feel? How does this food make me feel? Do I like the taste of it? What is the result when I do this type of exercise? Do I feel up after that? Do I feel dragged out after that? When I go to sleep at a routine time, literally directly ask yourself, what was that? Make that an experiment for yourself. Go to bed at 10 p.m. See how you feel. If you're used to going to bed at 11 p.m., try the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get into that sort of behavior, the body educates us. Very quickly we go, oh, actually, that's important. And it's a little funny. We have all these epigenetic age clocks and stuff. And like I was talking about, there's diminishing returns on effort for these. A lot of the low-hanging fruit for longevity is stuff that people have heard before. Sometimes they just have to see the data to be proved, to have that, proof hit them in the face and they go, oh yeah, okay, actually I probably should make sure I get in 90 minutes of vigorous exercise a week. Like, no, really. And I can show you the data for your age clock on why that's important. Sometimes you have to do that, but a lot of it really is, in one sense, not rocket science.
Yeah. And, I think there's so much of what you just shared. I'm sitting here taking notes, as I often do every time I see you. And the consciousness piece, your clinic, obviously, you have David right there who I've been through his hypnosis and different things, and it's been amazing. So you guys do holistically treat the whole person. And I think there's just a few key things there that you mentioned. The one that I really loved was essentially that your body is educating you.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not conscious of what's happening, then there's no way for you to be curious.
Yeah.
Right. And that we should be curious about the experience that we have as it relates to our energy and our vitality. And one of the things I've said too this month that I think it really hit home, Neela, is that, we need to think of our bodies as the vehicle for our visions, not the vehicles for our vanity.
Interesting.
And what I mean by that is that we want to be, as you just said, it's more important about optimizing for how you feel versus optimizing for how you look.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And because we both know there are people out there that, they look chiseled, they're shredded, whatever, they look amazing. But if they were to take one of these epigenetic age tests, I mean, that person may be 65 years old, even though they're 40.
Right. Yeah, it is absolutely true.
So the ultimate gauge to our health is ultimately how we feel, and we should be paying attention to that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, I'm thinking about those YouTube fitness influencers right now. There's 20-year-olds who have a neck this big and they can't breathe. They're like, "Hey, I'm here at the gym again." You're like, yeah.
And then there's also the guys that can pull it off where they're super, our friend Chad Richards, who's, as healthy as they come, but also he's super ripped. So Chad, we just, we got to hate on that guy because he's got it on, on both ends.
He's got it going on though, right? Because he gets the consciousness piece.
He does.
Right? That's unusual. Everybody who connects with their consciousness is going to be healthier. Period. Full stop. And that's one of the secrets of meditation. It's going to teach you about what is limiting you mentally, but it's also going to teach you about what limits you physically. If you just are conscious, if you're just aware of what feedback you're getting, you're going to be able to iterate on that.
Yeah. Neela, how do you, the meditation thing, especially with entrepreneurs, right? There's always a claim of a lack of resources as it relates to meditation. It's, I don't have the time, right? Or I don't know what to do. When you have somebody in your midst that is struggling with either of those things, how do you respond to that?
Yeah. Ultimately, they have to want it. They have to want it, and they have to believe that it works. That's another thing. When I talk about cultural dogmas, meditation is kind of new and gaining a voice in our culture. But the first thing people think is, nah, that's bullshit. Right? Somewhere in their head, they're thinking, nah, not really. And so one of the things that I think really makes a difference for meditation is to prove it to people, to sit them down and be like, listen, we're going to do this together in a way that works for you. You tell me if it's not catching, and we're going to do this. And you're going to have an experience from that.
Yeah.
Prove it to yourself. don't take my word for it. One of my favorite tools for this is pranayama, yogic breathing. It is a really, really good way to induce a meditative state. And it's just using breath. And it is genuinely astounding. I'm not necessarily talking about, box breathing. There's all sort of like relaxing breath work that people can do. But if you do some more intensive pranayama with someone, even someone who's never done it before, they're going to, within 15 minutes, go, holy moly, there's a whole other layer there that I really didn't believe. Mm. So you just help them get to that point, and then they prove it to themselves. And after that, imagine that you've never seen a strawberry before, and suddenly you taste a strawberry. You're going to want more strawberry. You're like, okay, what was that thing? Like, I had that once. It was actually kind of amazing. Great. I'll eat some blueberries. I'll eat some grapes. But like, where's the strawberry at? Mm-hmm. So you just have to have people taste it. And then it proves itself. It's delicious,
It's true. Yeah, it's absolutely true. So we're getting close to the end here, Neela. And I'm curious, any parting thoughts of words of wisdom that you would give to the audience before we wrap this up?
Specifically to entrepreneurs, I know you guys are all stressed. I know you guys are all working hard. And I am a big believer in the saying that stress is not a bad thing. So don't get me wrong when I say this, but you need to balance that. If you're feeling stressed out, that just means you're very, very on. And you need to balance that with some dedicated time being off. That's the traditional Chinese yin and yang system, for instance. And this is not dissimilar to what we were just talking about for pranayama or meditation. If you do that, it'll prove itself to you. I know a lot of you are like, no, not going to do it. Thanks. I hear that all the time. I'm just not going to. I'm busy. Try it. Just try it for 15 minutes. Literally go out, leave your phone inside, look at the clouds for 15 minutes and force yourself to be bored. Come back in and notice how much more efficient you are. Yeah. Now, that's great for business. That's great for the bottom line, but it also dramatically affects your longevity if you can make that a practice. So it's literally a win-win.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And force your kids to be bored, by the way, too. Yeah. It's okay for them to go to dinner and not be on a phone or a device and to have to suffer through your company.
Literally torture. Yeah.
So, some of the big things I took away from this, Neela, and thank you. I mean, you've made my life richer in so many different ways. And definitely one is find a data-driven coach, a data-driven partner, somebody that can help you understand the uniqueness of your health and what it is that you're looking to accomplish. I thought that the whole conversation around connecting this to your consciousness, that is something that I have never walked into any other doctor besides you and had a conversation about meditation or breathing ever. And so, connecting the consciousness to it.
It's critical.
And then lastly, that last thing you said, just go outside and force yourself to be bored. It reminds me of a quote that you've probably heard it. I don't know who said it, but most of man's or all of man's problems come from his inability to sit alone with himself in a room or by himself in a room.
Yeah.
So for those of you that if for some reason you'd want more information or you want to check out the Atma Clinic, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. One is to text their info line. We will drop that into the chat box so that you have it. And you can also send them an email, admin at Atma Clinic, and that's ATMA clinic.com. And
yeah.
Yep. And then they're also on YouTube at the Atma MD is the handle for YouTube. And we'll make sure that we include all of that in the show notes. But again, Neela, thank you for being here. We so appreciate it. And we're all better for the work that you're doing.
Always happy to jam, brother.
All right, everybody. We'll see you back here, same time, same day, Wednesday, 7:30 Central for Wellness Wednesday. Make it a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care of yourselves.